I will discuss today about planning and preparation of the ARV management during COVID-19. And we all know that now we are entered in the 6th month of the pandemic, and till now the cases are increasing almost on daily basis in our country. And as Krishna said, we are taking probably light or something, whatever. We are getting the news, as even if we are facing the challenge for last 6 months, but still we are getting more and more new cases, new healthcare personnel are getting affected. So we need to, this is the recent report which shows that healthcare person, almost positivity among the healthcare person is around 7 to 12% compared to the national average of 5.5 to 6%. And there are many reasons were given, like they are not following infection control practices, not donning and doffing the PPE gear properly, not disposing PPE gear. So we need to revise, need to update daily on a regular basis our practices, our knowledge. And for that, we need a basic understanding of the COVID-19 infection. What is the mode of transmission? What is the factors which increase the risk of transmission? What are the methods which can prevent the transmission? And there are many guidelines from all the professional societies. Our All India Difficult Airway Association, AIDA, also has given the consensus guidelines for airway management during COVID-19 pandemic. And they have covered almost all the issues very nicely. So any planning and preparation starts with the information. So information about the infection, all the transmission modes, everything should be taught properly to the all healthcare personnel. Then our environment should be planned and modified according to the need. Then additional resource availability, we should plan. So teaching and training should start from the procedure, what are the procedure or AGP, aerosol generating procedure. And as we know that our basic work, what we do on daily basis, like mask ventilation, endotracheal intubation, all these are highly aerosol generated procedures. And probably we all have seen this picture, how the aerosol can spread up to the face mask of the intubator. So safety measures have to be taken, and that starts from the hand hygiene. So all the steps of hand hygiene, hand sanitizing, all these things has to be taught and trained. All the healthcare staff, including the housekeeping staff, they should be trained repeatedly on regular basis for all these techniques of hand hygiene. Then the donning, doffing of PPE. You all know that PPE is the paramount thing, we have to use it, but donning and doffing has got different steps, how to do it, we have to train them. And most importantly is the doffing part, because during doffing, the front part of the PPE is always contaminated, so it should be supervised. Then mock drill or simulation-based training, that is very, very important. After all the knowledge they acquire, everybody, all the healthcare personnel inside the theater, how they will behave when the COVID-19 patient will be on the table, how to deal with that patient with the all PPE. So this mock drill, time to time, it should be repeated, and then training also to be given on regular basis. Coming to OR environment, this operating room environment, ideally it should be a negative pressure room to prevent the infection spreading from inside the theater to outside. But if you see, most of our OTs are a positive pressure environment, but we can make it safer by increasing the air changes per hour. CDC has given a guideline which they recommend that if the air changes is around 15 per hour, then it takes around 28 minutes to remove the airborne contaminant by 99.9%. And if this air changes can be increased up to 20 per hour, then the time comes down to 21 minutes to remove the airborne contaminant by our 99.9%. So you can always discuss with your engineering department of the hospital, and you can find out what is the air changes per hour in your OT, inside the OT. And if required, you can increase that to make it safer environment. Then COVID operating room should be a separate room. It is designated isolated operating room with a separate ventilation system integrated with HEPA filter. But if it is not possible all the time, in that case, you can consider switching off the centralized air conditioner during the AGP. Also, scavenging system should be fully functional, and our doors to be kept closed for all the time. Then separate donning and doffing area should be marked outside the ward with visual guides. In Singapore, this hospital, they have reported this, in their report, they have shown nicely this donning doffing area. They are color coded. The blue is the clean area and red is the contaminated area. And they also showed this donning doffing steps, which is numerical sequence. This is very, very important. Whoever who has worked inside the COVID OT or COVID ICU, they all can understand that they can realize that when after some time their vision gets blurred because the goggles or this face skin screen, all this thing getting foggy. So in that condition, to see the visual guide is very difficult. So it should be big enough and bold color and numerical sequences. So it can help a lot. Next comes the preparation. Again, preparation of the team, preparation of the patient, and preparation of the operating room. So preferably you need 2 anesthesiologists should be there, and the most experienced senior person should manage the airway so that the fast pass success is increased. And before entering the theater, team should be briefed properly regarding the concerns of the patient. All the team members should know what is available in their setup and what is not available. They should know their role of each of them. Then they should plan beforehand how to communicate among each other. Because again, with the PPE, it's very difficult to hear each other all the time. So it should plan how to communicate. If they want to use they can use some sign language or anything. But communication is very important, which they should plan beforehand. Checklist can be very helpful. Then airway strategy also should be planned beforehand. In case it becomes difficult, then what should be the rescue strategy? So all this briefing should be done before entering the operating room. This DAS guideline has given a nice layout of the personnel, and they suggested 3 people should be there. One is intubator, 1 person should be assistant, and 1 person should be, the drug person should observe the monitor, and 1 runner should be the outside the room who can come in help during the need. And also, if possible, 2 phone should be there, both inside and outside the room for easy communication. Next comes the PPE, personal protective equipment. All of us are now very much aware of this PPE. From head to toe, everything should be covered. Head, hood, then goggles, then face shield, N95 mask, coverall, double gloves, shoe cover, everything should be there, should be fully covered. And all the health personnel who are inside the theater, they all should have the proper PPE. But PPE is very much uncomfortable after some time. So this comes very better comfortable PPE. This is PAPR, powered air purifying respirator. There is a blower which forces air through the filter cartilage and creates an air flow inside the breathing zone of the bladder. And it also provides a better protection. But obviously it comes very costly. So now our DRDO also has taken the feedback from the medical staff, and they are developing the device which is more comfortable to the PPE wearer. Coming to patient preparation, patient's face should be all the time covered with a surgical mask. Patient should be covered with a plastic sheet, and the patient should be transferred to a dedicated pathway directly to the operating room, bypassing any holding area. And the people or personnel who will transfer the patient, they also should be properly PPE clad. Now, coming inside the operating room, our anesthesia equipment also need to be modified. 2 HME filters should be used, and they also give some protection as per the manufacturer. They give some protection from the virus also. So 1 filter between the mask and the breathing circuit, and the second filter between the expiratory limb and the machine. And side stream capnography should be attached to the machine end of the HME filter. Now, video laryngoscope is very much handy because it allows us to stay away from the patient. then closed suction. There's some sort of barrier devices. It may be a plastic sheet or the aerosol box or intubation box. This box we are using in our hospital. We have made it in the beginning of the COVID pandemic time, and we made it two port for the intubator, one side port for the assistant, and also we made a port on the roof of the box. This top port allows the passage of bougie or fiber optic bronchoscope, and the other end is open, which is covered with the plastic sheet. But it is in the beginning, it obviously needs a learning curve, but we could find that in case of difficult intubation, it's really difficult to maneuver your hand inside. So it's not that easy to use in all patient. And after that, lot of literature also came up in for or against this intubation box. Recently, this Sorbel et al., they have written a review, which probably will be published in the next issue. And they mentioned this box as a Pandora's box, and they apprehend that it may be a cards in place of gift. So outside the ward, there should be a standby airway cart. If better, if it can be labeled like this, so that it can come handy during any difficulty or any need. This DAS guideline, they also mentioned about the emergency tracheal intubation kit dump, which should be available outside the operation room. Now, after the procedure, these 4 Ds, this disposal of single-use item, disinfection of the reusable item, doffing properly, and debriefing from all the procedures, how we have just done. So debriefing also is very much important. This Italian group given a nice mnemonic, Stop COVID. So to take home message is the operating room, it is a complex environment with multiple stakeholders, starting from the housekeeping staff, nursing staff, surgeons, anesthesiologists. And it is a challenge to align the interest and concerns for all of them. But containment measures are very, very important, and they are needed not only to optimize the quality of care provided to COVID-19 patients, but also to reduce the risk of viral transmission to healthcare workers. Thank you. We have a NAC 2020 meeting, virtual meeting on 10th and 11th of October. I hope it will be a very interesting meeting. I request all of you to register for that.
I think we have just one more question from Dr. Supriya Jadhav Sarvade. I would ask Jyotsna ma'am to deal with this. This is a COVID-19 patients may at times come back after 15 days or so for any procedure, maybe a small procedure like endoscopy. At that time, should we repeat RT-PCR and any other precautions for these post-COVID patients? Jyotsna ma'am.
Yes, I think if patient comes back after 15.
Sound.
Hello. Yes, if suppose patient comes back after 15 days from the community, so there is always a chance for risk, reinfection or infection from the community. In that case, for being safer side, I think it should get the COVID test, RT-PCR test before taking the patient for any procedure.
Apex, Amit, Rakesh, would you do the same?
We have seen some patient coming back with the infection.
Actually, there is no definite safety system that once you are infected means you will not be reinfected again. There is no such system as such. Means there are a lot of studies where they are saying that there is a reinfection rate also. One point. Second point is obviously the patient does not have symptom, does not guarantee that the patient is not infected. So second point is this. And the third point is where is he coming from? Is he coming from a community where there is an high, where there is an infective zone, you can say. So in that case, there's always a possibility that this patient can be infected. So that is why it is always advisable that if it is more than 50, because if it is, had it been for 3 days, obviously you can say, come on, let's take it. But if it is for 15 days, I think even ICMR says that more than 72 hours to 7 hours.
The question is different. The question is different. The question was
I got your point. I got your point. The patient was already infected.
What I'd say is, what I'd suggest is that yes, RT-PCR should be done, and also probably, there's no clear-cut guideline, but I would advise, I have advised, one of patient HRCT, because HRCT changes in the sense lung changes remains there for a longer period. They are there for a longer period even if you are non-infective. So the significance of that we can only identify with the help of HRCT or probably not so well with the X-ray chest. But something of that sort should be done to identify patients' lung changes. And if they are very severe, we can defer that particular procedure. Or if they are okay, then we can go ahead with that procedure. Of course, RT-PCR has to be done once we have passed 15 days. But probably an HRCT or some sort of lungs, I would say, stratification, lung pathology.
What would you do? What would you do?
Amit, one thing here. Supposingly this patient does not have any lung infection, involvement. What would you do then? Patients are in a moderate category of people where there is no lung involvement. So in that case,
RT-PCR, lung involvement, both RT-PCR has to be done.
That is what I'm saying.
RT-PCR has to be done, and then probably
that is what I'm saying.
Mohit, we have seen the patient actually. The patient was negative before 10-15 days, and then patient coming back for the procedure, and that time we repeated the RT-PCR, and we got them positive.
That's what I'm
saying. We have that experience with that. So I prefer to do RT-PCR before taking procedure.
The question here was, this person was positive before. Now, after he was positive, now he has no symptoms after 15 days. He is coming back after 15 days. Would you again test for an RT-PCR and then take up? Or if there is no symptom, you go ahead and
he was not made.
That is also very dicey. Once positive, that means
he was not. So he was not made negative, it seems. Then he did not go for a negative testing as well.
Exactly.
So he was positive.
Would you wait for a negative test and then take up? Or would you say that if you look at the CDC guidelines, if you look at the ICMR, they says that there is no symptoms and then you wait for 10 days maybe, and then you're free to be...
No. For any procedure, we will like to have an RT-PCR.
You retest and then take up. That is the question.
CDC says, I think we are misinterpreting that. CDC says that you can release this person for a home quarantine, but not to take it up for a patient.
Yeah.
See, unless the patient is negative,
to have this
you are not confident.
This is not my opinion. I'm just putting it up.
Suppose patient is just a minute. Suppose patient is coming for an endoscopy after 15 days of getting positive. First, we need to look at whether endoscopy is necessary or emergency. If it is an emergency for life-saving procedure for GI bleed, then we have to consider that patient as a positive patient, and we need to go ahead with the due risk, and we need to take a due precaution.
So that is an emergency situation.
If it is
that is okay.
That's an emergency situation, so
if it is in a plan endoscopy, if it is in a plan endoscopy, then always wait for a while, get the RT-PCR done. If it is negative, then go ahead.
Yes.
Emergency, so we cannot wait. Supposing the patient comes with peritonitis, blunt abdomen trauma, so you cannot wait for the RT-PCR to come. So there you have to take it up. Keeping in mind that the patient is positive, we have to take all precautions and go ahead.
Yeah, true. See,
Amit and Rakesh?
If it is a not...
Sir, can I share some of my experience here? So one thing is, when we say the RT-PCR positive, RT-PCR positive because the ICMR have changed the guidelines not to do it at the time of discharge on 10th or 14th day. The reason was that RT-PCR was picking up the antigens, and the dead virus was circulating into the body, and that's why the RT-PCR was coming positive even at 2nd and 3rd week. And there were initially, if you remember, in April, around April or so, there were multiple cases which were saying on this day it was negative, 2 days after it became again positive. So that was basically the dead antigens of the dead virus which were giving positive. So that's why the RT-PCR has been given away. But even for immunocompromised patients, like for example, the oncology patients or patients who are on steroids for respiratory disease, the clearance of virus from the body has been found from 10 days to 3 to 4 weeks. So that's why the patient assessment is important. This is one aspect. Second aspect is when we say the patient who comes for any urgent or emergent surgery, what we do at our place is we have various options. The option includes the rapid antigen kit. This is one. Second is CB-NAT and TrueNAT. This is the another test. And third test is RT-PCR. Now, RT-PCR usually takes a little longer time, 6 to 8 hours. Rapid antigen kits are available now, though the specificity and sensitivity are low, but they give the test within next 2 minutes. The CBNAT and TrueNAT test are also being validated by ICMR, and the results are usually available within around 1 to 2 hours. So depending upon the urgency of surgery, you can get these tests done. So what we do is, if it's an emergency surgery like a trauma, we do a rapid antigen test. If it is positive, we consider positive. If negative, we still take all precautions because specificity and sensitivity are low.
Exactly.
In case patient can wait for some time, we always send RT-PCR even if the rapid antigen test is negative. If it is positive, it's positive. If it's negative, we send the RT-PCR, gets the case done, take all the precautions. If we have 1 to 2 hours, like in bronchoscopic procedures, we do a TrueNAT and CBNAT, which has a higher specificity than antigen test. These are one aspect. The next aspect would be, you said, somebody asked, sir, you also asked, that what if the patient has a past history of COVID-19 positivity, and then he has 15 days of asymptomatic or 10 days of asymptomatic. Now, in this situation, as Dr. Mohit mentioned, the chances of reinfections have been reported. We do not know. Indian data is not available on this aspect. So the other option would be, the antibody titer measurements are being done nowadays. So based on this antibody titer, you can think of whether the immunity has developed or it is primarily the secondary infection. But that will give you a clue. So I think in this way, we are able to differentiate between urgency versus emergency surgery, persistence of symptoms, or viral known COVID symptoms vis-a-vis persistence of COVID symptoms, and then take the precautions. But having said that, whatever the tests are coming, nothing is 100%. Till now, everybody has to take all the precautions, considering all patients to be COVID positive, and hence in the operation theater or a bronchoscopic procedures, level 3 PP should be worn for any such interventions, specifically airway related.
I think point well taken, Rakesh. I think
Yes.
at the end of the day, the bottom line is that whether your RT-PCR is positive, negative, or your TrueNAT is positive, negative, I think the bottom line is appropriate PPE, which for me it is N95 and above, face shields and goggles, and water impermeable gown at all points of time for all kinds of procedures.
Great.